Do you believe that a simple act of kindness can change someone's destiny forever? I'm not talking about grand gestures, the kind that make headlines and capture the world's attention. I'm talking about simple acts, often done in silence, without an audience, without expecting anything in return. Perhaps you've been there yourself, helping someone on the street, lending them something they couldn't do without, or even giving up something of your own to see someone else smile. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover now may surprise you and, who knows, even change the way you view the simplest everyday decisions. Today's story revolves around a humble mechanic, someone who lived life like many of us, working hard every day, facing bills, challenges, and unexpected events. His workshop was modest, with worn tools and limited space, but every part, every oil stain, and every customer who passed through carried a piece of his dedication. There was no luxury, there was no glamour, but there was something that can't be bought: honesty and courage. And it was precisely in this ordinary scenario that an extraordinary turnaround was about to occur. Imagine the scene. Amid the roar of engines and the smell of grease, a luxury car, shiny and imposing, pulls up right in front of the workshop. The contrast is stark. On one side, the simplicity of a man who struggles every day to survive with dignity. On the other, the obvious wealth of someone who, at first glance, seemed to have never felt the weight of want. The car's owner, dressed elegantly and wearing a watch that cost more than anything else in the workshop, gets out with an expression of impatience. This is the collision of worlds that often happens in life. The encounter between realities so different that for a moment it seems impossible to believe they could connect. And perhaps you've experienced something similar, that moment when you have to decide whether to simply follow the logical and predictable path or listen to your heart and let compassion speak louder. The mechanic knew the broken car part was expensive. He also knew the man had the money to pay and that covering the costs wouldn't be a problem. But inside him was something greater than the cold logic of transactions, a desire to help, to show that not everything revolves around money. It was an act of silent courage, a choice that might seem small, but carried within it the power of transformation. Now, think with me, how often do we underestimate the power of small decisions? How often do we believe nothing will change, that we simply move forward without expecting anything in return? But life has a curious way of surprising us, revealing hidden truths and unexpected rewards. What happened after the mechanic's gesture wasn't just a material reward, it was something much deeper, one that changes our mindset and shows the impact a simple act of kindness can have. What this man received in the mail weeks later not only changed his routine, but also his destiny. And that's precisely where the story comes to life, because it's not just about a car repair or unexpected help. It's about humanity, about decisions that seem small but carry the power to transform, to reveal hidden secrets no one imagines, and to prove that kindness can open doors we never imagined. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic because what this mechanic discovered in the silence of his ordinary day carries a powerful message that goes far beyond a simple workshop. And this is where the story begins to show its true impact. And it's at this point that the story begins to take on a different meaning, because it invites us to reflect on something much bigger than a simple car repair. It makes us think about choices, about humanity, and about the real impact each gesture can have on someone's life. Perhaps upon hearing this, you've remembered a time when you also acted from your heart, even without knowing the outcome. Or perhaps you've encountered a similar situation and been torn between logic and compassion. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what's resonated with you so far. I'd really like to hear how this story resonates with your own journey, Because when you share, it's not just your voice that resonates, it's the voice of an entire community that grows around messages like this. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content, people who may need to hear exactly this today. And if you feel that stories like this make a difference in your life, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. It's the simplest way to continue walking along, always receiving these narratives that inspire, move, and bring deep reflections on life. Oh, and don't forget to like. It may seem small, but each like helps show YouTube that this content is valuable and deserves to be shared with more people. Because ultimately, that's what we're trying to achieve here, to create a space for real connection, where stories like this mechanics become bridges between what we've experienced, what we feel, and what we can transform. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what happened after this gesture revealed a twist no one could have imagined. He wasn't just another face in the crowd, one of those who go unnoticed on the streets. His routine began early, when the sun had barely touched the horizon, and ended late, often after everyone had already gone home to rest. The metallic clang of tools, the smell of oil and grease lingering on his hands, the simple clothes always marked by hard work. This was the constant backdrop of his life. But behind his simplicity lay something greater, a giant heart, willing to help, even when life itself seemed to offer little in return. The mechanic, as many knew him, was a man accustomed to living with little, but who carried within himself an invisible wealth of generosity and empathy. In the small space of his workshop, he repaired cars as if he were caring for lives. Each vehicle that arrived had a story. Each customer brought with them problems and concerns that went beyond mechanics. He knew how to listen, knew when someone needed a word of comfort as much as an engine repair. And it was this human perspective that set him apart. While others saw only broken parts, he saw people in need of support, and that made all the difference. This mindset, almost rare in a fast-paced, individualistic world, transformed the workshop into a space of trust, where it wasn't just about cars, but about relationships. It was common for him, even though he was paid little for his work, to refuse to charge someone who couldn't afford it, or to improvise so they could move on. Many called him a fool for this, saying that kindness didn't fill the stomach, and that living with an open heart only brought harm. But he remained steadfast, believing that every decision to help, every act of genuine kindness, planted invisible seeds that would one day germinate. Perhaps it was a silent faith in the power of life to give back what we give. Perhaps it was simply his way of seeing the world. The fact is, even in the face of difficulties, he never let the harshness of life dim his capacity for self-giving. And in this contrast between simplicity and greatness of spirit, his character gained even more strength. Because it wasn't about having a lot or displaying wealth. It was about living with integrity, about knowing that true impact lies in how we touch those around us. He became, without realizing it, an example of transformation and resilience, proving that it's not financial status that measures someone's greatness, but rather their choices, their attitudes, and the way they approach each journey. And perhaps this is precisely what makes his story so powerful. How many of us have caught ourselves believing that to change lives, we need great resources, great opportunities, or important positions. But the hidden truth that few see is that often power lies in simplicity. It lies in the decision to act with empathy when it would be easier to turn away, in the silent impact of a choice that, in the eyes of the world, seems small but carries within it the power of a personal revolution. This humble mechanic, accustomed to living with little, shows us that greatness is revealed precisely behind the scenes of life, where no one applauds, but where the most genuine gestures flourish. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic because it's at this point in the story that the first major twist emerges. The unlikely encounter between this simple man and someone who lived in a world completely different from his own, a wealthy man accustomed to excess, power, and comfort. And it's in this clash of realities that we begin to realize how life has an unexpected way of bringing opposing universes together to reveal transformative truths. Comment there. That makes sense to me. His workshop wasn't large nor modern, nor did it have the glitz of a high-end store. It was a small space, almost hidden in the middle of the neighborhood, where time seemed to have left its mark. The grease-stained walls, the uneven cement floor, the makeshift shelves filled with tools worn from use. Every detail carried silent stories of battles won with effort and dedication. The air carried that unmistakable smell of burnt oil, mixed with cold iron, and anyone who passed by knew they wouldn't find luxury, but they would find someone willing to solve the problem with honesty and dedication. The customers were mostly local residents, simple folks who trusted that mechanic more for his heart than for the shop's resources. They knew that behind that modest atmosphere there was a professional who wouldn't let anyone down. How many times had someone come in desperate because they needed their car for work the next day and didn't have enough money? And he, without a second thought, fixed what he could, trusting that life would eventually bring a return. This authenticity, so rare in these days when everything seems to revolve around profit and haste, made him an invisible pillar of the community. There was something almost poetic about that daily routine. While the world outside seemed to spin faster and faster, inside that workshop, time slowed down. It was as if each repair was a reminder that patience and care still have value. The sound of tools echoed like background music, and the small gestures, a coffee offered to the customer, a joke told to ease the tension, a sincere smile after the job was finished, transformed that space into something more than a repair shop. It was a meeting place where humanity and simplicity met. This reality, so authentic and raw, demonstrated the power of real life without filters or illusions. There were no polished glass display cases, no modern machines that did everything themselves. What sustained that place was sweat, accumulated experience, and a mindset of never giving up, even when the bills piled up and resources seemed insufficient. And that's precisely what made his story so compelling, because it carried the hidden truth that, even amidst scarcity, it's possible to make an impact and leave a profound mark on people's lives. This initial scenario is important because it shows not only where it all began, but also who he truly was. An ordinary man, surrounded by limitations, but capable of offering more than any modern workshop: honesty, respect, and kindness. And when we look at this seemingly ordinary routine, we realize that it is often in the ordinary that the extraordinary hides, waiting just for the right moment to reveal itself. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because it is precisely in this simple space, where life seemed to flow without any major surprises, that destiny prepared an encounter capable of transforming everything. Right there, I'm on this journey too. It was a day like any other in that simple workshop, with the metallic sound of tools echoing through the space and the smell of oil mingling with the air. The mechanic was already accustomed to the neighborhood's old cars, the ones that needed urgent repairs to keep running. But at that moment, an unexpected contrast appeared before his eyes. A luxury car, gleaming and imposing, stopped abruptly right in front of the workshop. The roar of the misfiring engine seemed almost contradictory to the shine of the impeccable paintwork and the chrome details reflecting the sun. It was as if two worlds, so different, had collided at that very moment. Curious neighbors soon gathered around to observe the scene, It was unusual to see such a sophisticated vehicle on that modest street, where most cars bore the marks of time and daily use. The sight of the car parked there caused astonishment, but also aroused a sense of suspense. Who could be the owner, and what was he doing there? To many, it seemed almost unreal, as if fate had decided to play a trick on the peaceful daily life of that place. The mechanic, his hands still covered in grease, wiped the sweat from his forehead and observed the scene casually. There was no arrogance in his gaze, no dazzlement at material wealth. To him, a car was just a car. It didn't matter if it was an older model, riddled with patches, or a state-of-the-art one. What mattered was what lay behind it, the need of someone who, at that moment, was in dire straits, and perhaps it was precisely this simple, honest mindset that set him apart. The owner of the vehicle emerged, well-dressed, with a firm posture and a look of mingled irritation and concern. To anyone watching, it was clear he wasn't accustomed to dealing with unexpected events, much less in places that didn't suit his lifestyle. The contrast between a man surrounded by wealth and a humble mechanic in a simple workshop created an almost cinematic scene loaded with symbolism and a hidden truth. Deep down, all of us, rich or poor, are subject to the same unexpected events in life. This seemingly banal moment had a profound impact because it brought to light a deeper reflection on how we judge and interpret the value of people based on appearances. While some around whispered, commenting on how the man didn't belong in that scene, the mechanic saw only someone who needed help. And this human perspective, which transcended immediate judgment, was what would define everything that was about to happen. The transformation of that scene began there, with the contrast between simplicity and wealth, between humility and power, between two realities that rarely meet so directly. And perhaps it is precisely in these unlikely encounters that life offers us its greatest revelations. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because what seemed like just a mechanical problem hid a much larger journey of compassion, choices, and consequences that no one on that street could have imagined. Right there. This makes sense to me. Imagine this scene. The heavy door of a luxury car slowly opens, revealing an impeccably dressed man, a shiny watch on his wrist, and an expression filled with impatience. He looks around as if he can't believe that this very place, a simple workshop with worn tools, weather-beaten walls, and the smell of grease in the air, was the scene of his problem. The contrast between the sophistication of someone accustomed to solving everything with money and the simplicity of an environment where every detail reveals struggle and dedication is almost cinematic. On one side, a man who may never have had to wait for anything in his life. On the other, a humble mechanic, his hands stained with oil, but with a heart bigger than many safes full of gold. This clash of realities creates an uncomfortable silence, as if the world had stopped to observe two universes that rarely intersect. The car owner speaks quickly, with short sentences and a tone that blends urgency and authority, as if his social standing gives him the right to be served before anyone else. The loyal neighborhood customers, accustomed to the calm, almost familiar rhythm of the shop, glance sideways, trying to understand how such an elegant man ended up there. And in the midst of this tension stands the mechanic, breathing deeply, balancing two opposing forces in his mind. One of someone who knows that every wasted minute means one less customer to pay the bills, and one of someone who also understands that life sometimes presents us with tests that go beyond money. He could simply refuse service or charge a high price to seize the opportunity. But there's something different in his gaze, a hint of humanity, a hidden truth that only those who have experienced the hardships of everyday life can grasp. As he adjusts his gloves and wipes the sweat from his brow, the mechanic looks at the car, owner without arrogance, but also without diminishing himself. There's an emotional impact in this first encounter that requires no words, because both understand, albeit unconsciously, that this moment will be decisive for something greater. The wealthy man, accustomed to quick, practical decisions, finds himself faced with a decision that can't be resolved with a simple signature or bank transfer. The mechanic, in turn, sees in the stranger's impatient gaze a mixture of fear and pride, as if the broken-down car weren't just a mechanical problem, but also a symbol of fragility, of a life that always seemed in control and now, for a moment, wasn't. And it is precisely in this contrast that the beauty of the scene emerges. Because life is made of unlikely encounters, those that seem to happen by chance, but carry within them the seed of a silent transformation. How often is it in an unexpected moment, in a simple setting, that the most profound revelations emerge? Here, the modest workshop becomes the stage for a larger narrative, where compassion, patience, and choices will define the course of two different stories. It's not just about a broken-down car. It's about how life's behind-the-scenes encounters confront us with challenges that test our mindset, reveal our essence, and often forever change the way we see the world. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what happens after this initial shock will show that small gestures have a much greater impact than one might imagine. And before we continue, leave a comment below. This resonates with me if you also believe that unlikely encounters can transform destinies. The silence that hung over the shop seemed to weigh more heavily than the smell of oil in the air. The mechanic, screwdriver still in hand, had finished examining the gleaming but damaged engine of that luxurious car that stood so out of place in the surroundings. The problem was clear to him. The part was doomed. Without replacing it, that car wouldn't make it out of there, no matter how impeccable its outward appearance. But there was something even more difficult to face than the technical issue. The cost of the part was high, far above what most ordinary customers in the neighborhood could imagine paying. And before him stood a man who could clearly afford any cost, but whose impatient, almost disdainful look seemed to turn the situation into an invisible test. The rich man adjusted the expensive watch on his wrist and bluntly asked firmly, "How much will it cost?" His tone wasn't one of someone concerned about the price, but of someone who expected to hear a high sum and pay without question. To him, money was just a detail, a tool to keep everything running smoothly. But for the mechanic, it wasn't so simple. This wasn't just about giving a figure. He knew he could seize the opportunity, charge a premium, perhaps even more than necessary, and the man wouldn't even notice. After all, how many times had he himself sacrificed to buy a tool or pay a repair bill, while others seemed to live without ever having to count every penny? This dilemma consumed him. On one hand, the possibility of earning money that would certainly be needed for his monthly expenses. On the other, the weight of his own conscience, which had always been guided by honesty, even in difficult times. The hidden truth of the situation was that the mechanic was not just faced with a broken car, but with a decision that would reveal his mindset, his values, and the essence of who he was. And silently he asked himself, is the right thing to do simply what needs to be done, without exploiting the situation, even if it's a chance to make my life easier for a while? As he wiped his hands on a worn cloth, his thoughts raced faster than his words. He knew that moment carried a greater impact than it seemed. It was as if he were at a crossroads where small choices define great destinies. It wasn't just a matter of money. It was about character, about the hidden details of life that no one sees, but that shape who we truly are. The rich man's watchful gaze, waiting for an answer, only heightened the tension. as if the difference between the two worlds were concentrated in that simple question: how much will it cost? Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic because the mechanic's answer, simple on the surface, carried a revelation capable of changing not only the course of that conversation, but the fate of both of them. Comment: I'm on this journey too. If you've ever faced a choice that seemed small but carried enormous weight in your life. The silence that fell over the workshop after the rich man's question seemed to carry a weight greater than any machine inside. The mechanic took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the parts scattered on the floor, the open engine before him, and the stark contrast between the simple world he lived in and the world of luxury that this client represented. He knew exactly how much the part cost, how much time it would take, and how that decision could ease or burden his pocket at the end of the month. But at the same time, he knew there were choices that couldn't be measured in money. With a calm but firm gaze, he made the decision that would change everything: repair the car free of charge. The rich man's eyes widened, as if he hadn't quite understood. It was unusual, almost unthinkable, for someone to refuse money for such a technical and specialized service. But the mechanic, with his simple, confident voice, explained that sometimes a gesture of kindness is worth more than any sum. He used the few spare parts he kept for emergencies, parts he would certainly need for future jobs, but which would now serve to restore the car's mobility. It was as if he were offering a piece of himself, a precious resource, in the name of something greater than financial logic. The rich man, incredulous, tried to insist. He asked 2-3 times the price, even opening his wallet ready to pay. But the mechanic just shook his head, firmly refusing, and said, "No need, it's done." That moment carried an invisible force because it wasn't just a mechanical repair, but a lesson in mindset and values. Deep down, it was as if the humble man was saying, "What defines who I am is not how much I earn, but how true I choose to be to my principles." This generous decision exposed something few can see: the hidden truth that power doesn't always lie in money, but in the freedom not to be a slave to it. The mechanic could have seized the opportunity to ask for an exorbitant sum, justifying that the customer could afford it, but he chose to go against the grain, demonstrating that there are still behind-the-scenes moments in life where ethics and compassion speak louder. It was as if he were making it clear that even with little, he could still offer a lot. As the car roared back to life, now working perfectly, the rich man remained silent, watching with suspicion mixed with admiration. Perhaps he was wondering what the true motivation behind this gesture was, whether there was some hidden agenda or if it was just an act. But the mechanic wasn't seeking applause or recognition. His satisfaction lay in seeing a job well done and in keeping his conscience clear. The impact of this gesture, however, was only beginning to unfold, because choices like these reverberate beyond the moment, transforming stories and spanning journeys. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because what seemed like just a one-off act of kindness had unexpected consequences that would reveal themselves shortly thereafter. Comment below. This makes sense to me. If you believe that true generosity doesn't need a stage, but always finds a way to transform lives. The rich man stood still for a few seconds, observing the mechanic who had just refused his money. His eyes roamed over every detail of that simple yet meaningful scene. The small workshop, the oil-stained floor, the time-worn tools, and at the center of it all, that man with calloused hands who, without asking for anything in return, had restored life to his luxury car. Inside, a mix of conflicting feelings swirled. His pride, fueled by years of wealth and status, wanted to believe there was some ulterior motive behind that gesture. But at the same time, something inside him whispered that perhaps it was simply the purity of a heart that knew how to see value beyond money, Distrust was almost automatic on his face. After all, in a world where everything seems to have a price, how can one accept someone simply giving away their most precious possession, the fruit of their labor, for free? Yet, as the engine roared to life again and the steady sound of the car echoed as a testament to the mechanic's skill, the rich man felt a lump tighten in his throat. It was as if reality had placed him before a mirror, revealing a hidden truth about himself. Despite possessing so much, he was faced with someone who, with so little, seemed infinitely richer in humanity. He tried to mask the impact with silence, as if unwilling to show weakness, but his mind was racing. He wondered how many times he had been in situations where he could have helped someone and hadn't. How many decisions had been guided by the coldness of numbers rather than the warmth of compassion. The contrast between worlds intensified, that of material abundance, which often suffocates, and that of simplicity, which surprisingly liberates. It was as if, in that instant, a portal had opened within him, inviting him to see beyond appearances, beyond what he had always believed to be a priority. The mechanic, for his part, didn't seem to be seeking recognition. He continued his routine, gathering up tools, wiping his hands on a worn rag, as if nothing momentous had happened. And it was precisely this naturalness that further disarmed the rich man. He expected, perhaps a veiled demand, an indirect remark, or even a request for a future favor. But there was none of that, just a silence full of meaning, a gesture that said more than any words could. The reflection deepened in his mind. How many times had he looked at humble people and judged them without even knowing their stories? How many times had he confused value with price, failing to realize that there are things that can never be bought? That simple mechanic had shown, without speeches or theories, that true wealth manifests itself behind the scenes of life in choices that seem small but carry profound impact. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what seemed like just an exchange of services and favors hid revelations capable of transforming not only that rich man, but anyone willing to reflect on the power of a genuine gesture. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. If you've ever noticed that life's greatest lessons often come from where we least expect them, the dust from the road had already settled, and the roar of the luxurious engine that had departed blended with the everyday sounds of the neighborhood. The mechanic took a deep breath, wiped his greasy hands on the worn rag he always carried in his pocket, and returned to his routine. For him, that act of kindness had been simply a natural choice, something undeserving of special mention or remembrance. After all, his life was made up of small acts like that, almost invisible to the world, yet part of his essence. The workshop once again filled with the sound of hammers, the squeal of tires, and the clanking of tools, as if the luxury car incident had been merely a pause between repairs. In that simple space, marked by stained walls and old tools, the mechanic found meaning. It was there that he built his story every day, without applause or audience, only with the clear knowledge that his work helped real people continue their journeys. Neighborhood customers showed up, with old cars, broken bicycles, and even improvised machines, and he, with patience and dedication, always found a way. What stood out was not only his skill, but the way he treated each person, with respect, with a word of encouragement, as if each repair were also an opportunity to strengthen bonds and spread dignity. While the outside world raced for status, power, and money, he remained rooted in values that seemed forgotten. He knew he would never get rich fixing cars in a small shop, but he also knew that true wealth lay in living with integrity, in sleeping soundly, knowing he had done his best for every customer who walked through his door. This mindset protected him from greater frustrations, as his measure of success wasn't the size of his bank account, but the human impact he could make with what he did best, behind the scenes of his life, there were silent battles few knew about. The rent for his workshop, the piling bills, the nights he had to choose between buying new parts or putting food on the table at home. But not even these pressures could make him give up the essence that guided him, the certainty that kindness always finds a way back. Helping someone without expecting anything in return was, for him, a courageous decision, an act of faith amidst uncertainty, and this gave him the strength to carry on. However, as he returned to his routine, there was a hidden truth stirring behind the scenes of his story. That seemingly distant and cold, wealthy man hadn't simply disappeared from his life. The memory of his generous gesture had remained etched in his mind, like a scar that, instead of hurting, inspired. But the mechanic, busy with his tasks and absorbed in his daily simplicity, had no idea that his attitude, so natural to him, had planted a seed that would soon bear unexpected fruit. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because it's precisely in the normality of everyday life that great transformations begin to unfold. We often think that only grand gestures have an impact, but it's in the silence of small acts that fate finds space to weave its most surprising twists and turns. And when we least expect it, life shows us that every choice, no matter how simple it may seem, has the power to change not only the present, but the entire future of those it touches. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Days turned into weeks, and the mechanic returned to his usual routine. The clanking of tools, the smell of burning oil, the loyal neighborhood customers with their vintage cars that already felt like family. Nothing extraordinary seemed to be happening, and that episode with the luxury car began to fade from memory as just another story among many. Yet, even in the face of hardship, there was something about him that never wavered, his unshakable faith that goodness, somehow, always returns. It was this mindset that kept him going, even when the weight of overdue bills, expensive parts, and a simple life seemed to suffocate any hope. There were days when he would close the shop late in the afternoon and wonder how he would balance it all. The lack of money sometimes hit harder than physical exhaustion, and yet he forged ahead, driven by a quiet confidence that he was not alone on his journey. To many, this stance might seem naive, but for him it was a conscious decision, almost a philosophy of life. He chose to believe that every gesture of compassion, no matter how small, carried the power to plant seeds that would germinate in due time. And this, in a way, made him richer than any customer who brought an imported car into his shop. The weeks of silence also brought moments of reflection. Sometimes, sitting on the wooden bench in front of the workshop, he would watch the hustle and bustle of the street and think about how people chase material gains without realizing that the true impact lies in the relationships they cultivate. He knew he didn't have much to offer in terms of luxury, but he had something that not even money could buy: authenticity. Every decision he made was aligned with his essence, and this created a peace that sustained his journey, even when life seemed to demand more than he could give. Still, there was a hidden side to this story he was unaware of. The silence of the weeks didn't signify oblivion, but rather the preparation of something greater being drawn out behind the scenes. And this is one of life's most intriguing truths. Often the impact of our choices isn't immediate. The world may seem quiet, as if nothing had changed, but behind the scenes, invisible, there's always a web of connections being woven, ready to reveal something transformative at the right moment. He didn't know it, but that act of generosity had set off a chain reaction, poised to transcend the barriers of time and distance. Meanwhile, his heart grew stronger. Each challenge faced, each difficulty overcome, each choice made amid scarcity shaped his character like iron, being tempered by fire. And the curious thing is that he didn't even realize the enormity of it. To him, it was just life happening, one day at a time. But to an outside observer, there was something deeply inspiring in that attitude. It was living proof that true wealth lies in how we face the silent, behind the scenes of existence, when no one applauds, when there is no audience, when all that remains is the conviction that we are doing the right thing. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this period of silence, when nothing seems to happen, is precisely where the greatest transformations begin to unfold. It's in this interval between action and consequence that life tests us, shapes our mindset, and teaches us to trust in processes we can't yet see. The mechanic didn't imagine it, but his journey was about to change, and all because of a seemingly small decision. Right there, I'm on this journey too. Time had already taken care of transforming that episode with the luxury car into just another distant memory. The mechanic went about his life as usual, serving local customers, improvising creative solutions for expensive parts he couldn't afford immediately, and keeping his shop afloat through hard work, sweat, and faith. It was a repetitive routine, but also filled with meaning, because each repair represented trust. And for someone like him, trust was worth more than money. But suddenly, on an ordinary day that seemed to hold no surprises, something unexpected happened. Among the usual bills, supermarket flyers, and unimportant papers, one envelope caught my eye. White, plain, with no clear sender. The kind of correspondence most would dismiss without a second thought, but something about it seemed different. The paper was thicker, the handwriting of the address was firm yet careful, and there was a curious detail. Although there was no indication of who had sent it, their name was written impeccably, without errors, as if it had been written with purpose. He held the envelope for a few moments before opening it, as if he felt the weight of it not only in the paper, but in what he carried inside. His hands, accustomed to handling grease and heavy tools, now trembled slightly at something so simple. It was just a letter, but his heart raced, as if he sensed something inside that could change everything. When he finally tore the seal, the silence in the workshop seemed to intensify. Every second of opening the envelope felt like a prelude to something greater. He removed a carefully folded sheet of paper, the quality of which didn't match the usual bills and notifications he received. As he opened it, his eyes fixed on the first words, and for a moment he was speechless. The content left him speechless. It wasn't just any message. It was personal, profound, written clearly, almost as if each sentence were meant to reach not just his mind, but his soul. It was a revelation that connected directly to the episode he'd experienced weeks before. The letter spoke of gratitude, of destiny, of how a simple act of kindness can resonate far beyond the moment in which it occurs. And, more than words, there was also an unexpected element. Inside the envelope, beyond the sheet of paper, was something he hadn't expected to find. Something concrete, material, yet charged with meaning. In that instant, his world seemed to stop. The man who lived his days the same, accustomed to the harshness of a simple life, now held in his hands proof that the invisible also works in silence. The letter was not only a response to what he had done, but a kind of confirmation that his choices had a real impact, that his act of generosity had not been lost to time, and that someone, somewhere, had been deeply touched by it. The contrast between the simplicity of the envelope and the grandeur of the message seemed to carry a powerful lesson. Never underestimate the reach of your actions. Life has its hidden truths, its hidden truths, and it's in these seemingly small details that the greatest impacts occur. The mechanic took a deep breath, trying to process each word, and deep down, he felt that this was just the surface of something greater about to be revealed. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because what was written in that letter was not just a thank you. It was the beginning of a transformation that would change his perspective on his own journey and the meaning of everything he did. Comment. There. That makes sense to me. Inside the letter, beyond the firm handwriting and each word's precise writing, there was a sense of weight, as if the envelope had been laden with intentions greater than the mechanic could have imagined. He read the first line, and his eyes filled with surprise. It wasn't just a thank you for the kind gesture, but a revelation about who this wealthy man who one day showed up at his shop with a broken-down luxury car really was. Those words carried with them not only recognition, but also an unexpected proposal, something capable of completely changing the trajectory of his life. The contrast between the simple world of the shop and the promise contained in that paper seemed so great that he had to reread it several times to believe what was before him. The message spoke of values, of decisions that shape destinies, and of how a seemingly small act can generate gigantic transformation. The letter's author emphasized that he had seen something rare in the mechanic's attitude, a hidden truth that isn't revealed in resumes or appearances, but only in moments of sincerity. He mentioned that this gesture of refusing payment, of acting out of pure compassion, was the kind of mindset missing in many powerful environments, and that he therefore wanted to open a previously unimaginable door. With each line, the sense of impact grew, as if the universe had chosen that specific moment to reveal a new journey. The mechanic, accustomed to handling rusty tools and the inner workings of simple life, now found himself faced with a revelation that seemed to come straight out of a dream. The letter outlined a clear proposal. There was a job opportunity, or rather, a partnership, something that transcended car repairs and involved trust, loyalty, and a vision for the future. The wealthy man, it seemed, was not just an occasional customer, but someone with great influence who recognized in the worker's humility a rare value, worthy of cultivation and expansion. The mechanic's mind began to race between doubts and hopes. How could he accept something so grand? Was he ready to take on such a huge responsibility? The text spoke of new paths, of decisions that could lead to a transformation of mindset, and of the chance to leave a limited life behind and embrace a story full of new possibilities. He felt his heart race, as if each beat were a reminder that destiny was knocking at his door, asking only for the courage to enter. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it wasn't just an invitation or a professional opportunity. The letter revealed between the lines that the wealthy man had tested the mechanic, perhaps consciously, perhaps driven by a personal need to rediscover values that money can't buy. It was as if he had tested not only his technical skill, but above all his human essence, his compassion, and his ability to act without expecting anything in return. This detail changed everything, because it showed that it wasn't a coincidence, but rather a planned revelation, loaded with symbolism and real impact. Little by little, the mechanic realized that the message wasn't just about him, but also conveyed a universal lesson, that simple decisions made with the heart can open doors that no calculated strategy could unlock. It was as if life's behind-the-scenes story was revealing that every choice has invisible but powerful consequences, capable of transforming entire journeys. This hidden truth now revealed itself before his eyes, not as a distant promise, but as a tangible gift ready to be embraced. He reread the last sentence of the letter, which stated that he would soon receive more details about the proposal. There were no amounts, no clear conditions, only the certainty that this would change everything. The silence in the workshop that night seemed to amplify the weight of those words. It was an invitation to believe, to take a risk, to accept that the impact of a Generous act could be far greater than any calculation could predict. Comment below, this makes sense to me, if you also believe that a gesture of kindness can be the trigger for an unexpected transformation. The mechanic sat for long minutes, holding the letter as if it were fragile, unable to believe that his calloused hands could touch a piece of paper capable of carrying so much weight. It was as if each written word was not just ink, but an invitation to transformation, an open door to a life he had never dared imagine until then. The text spoke of concrete possibilities, the chance to have his workshop renovated, equipped with the best tools to expand his business, or even to hold a position in a large company where his practical knowledge and honesty would be valued at levels far beyond simple payment for services. He knew that moment wasn't just a reward, but proof that decisions made from the heart, without expecting immediate returns, have the power to change destinies. It was a reminder that the mindset of acting with kindness, even in the midst of difficulties, can create an invisible network of connections, capable of yielding far greater results than any rational calculation could predict. And, as he thought about this, a whirlwind of emotions washed over him: pride, fear, gratitude, and even doubt. Should he accept? Was he ready to leave behind the simple life and embrace this unexpected opportunity? The workshop, which had always been the setting for his perseverance, seemed dwarfed in that moment by the vast possibilities the letter revealed. He looked at his worn tools, vivid reminders of so many nights of hard work, and wondered if this might be the right time to take a bigger step. After all, life was handing him a rare opportunity, almost like a second chance, and it was up to him to decide whether he would have the courage to walk through this new door. The transformation lay not only in what he could achieve, but mainly in the mindset he would need to develop to navigate this new phase. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the true impact was not just in the help received, but in the hidden meaning behind it. That rich man who one day stopped in front of his workshop hadn't simply thanked him. He had tested, revealed a truth few knew, that the backstage of life is made up of simple choices, but they carry gigantic consequences. The mechanic wasn't chosen by chance. It was his essence, his selfless decision, that put him in that place, faced with that opportunity. This shows how life silently observes and rewards gestures born of authenticity. And perhaps that's what makes the story so powerful. The lesson that we never know who's watching us, what revelations are being woven in secret, or how each action can reverberate into a future we can't yet see. The transformation, therefore, wasn't just professional or financial, but also spiritual and emotional. He was being invited to see himself in a new light, no longer just as a humble worker in a simple workshop, but as someone worthy of trust, of growth, of being remembered as an example of humanity in a world where haste and indifference so often speak louder. This invitation to change required not only the courage to accept, but also the wisdom to understand that none of it was a coincidence. Every bill paid with difficulty, every sleepless night, every client served with dedication had been part of a journey that prepared him for this moment. The letter, the opportunity, the proposed partnership, all were the result of a harvest that began with the seed of a simple gesture, watered by the hidden truth of his compassion. As he thought, he realized that, more than changing his life, that transformation had the power to impact everyone around him, his family, his neighbors, even the young people who passed by the workshop and perhaps now saw him as someone who had proven, in practice, that choices made with empathy can open paths that money alone cannot buy. And that's precisely why this story is moving, because it shows that true wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we choose to give, even when no one is looking. Right there. I'm on this journey too. If you believe that small gestures have the power to transform entire lives, at that moment, the mechanic began to see his own life from a new perspective. The memory of all the times he had reached out to someone, expecting nothing in return, came back to him like a sequence of small pictures. Each sacrifice, each simple decision guided by compassion, now seemed part of a larger plot. He realized that true transformation lay not just in the letter he received, but in the invisible impact his actions had had over time. It was as if life was showing him, with unexpected clarity, that no kindness is lost, even if it takes time to blossom. How many times have you done something for someone and deep down wondered if it was truly worth it? Because that's precisely where the essence of this story lies. Answers don't always arrive when we expect them, but they come in ways that can change everything. As he reflected on what had happened, his mindset expanded. He no longer saw kindness as a simple, isolated act, but as an invisible investment in something much greater, in the fabric of human relationships, in the hidden truth that only reveals itself when we are willing to see beyond appearances. The contrast between that luxury car parked at the door of his workshop and his simple life no longer seemed like an abyss to him, but rather a bridge. A bridge built by selfless choices, capable of connecting seemingly distant worlds. This revelation had a profound impact, for he understood that, even in the midst of hardship, every decision to act with empathy shapes destinies, not only the destiny of the recipient, but also of the giver. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's a silent backstage that's rarely discussed. Each person's internal struggle when faced with the choice between selfishness and generosity. How many times do we fail to act because we think it won't make a difference? And yet, it's precisely these small decisions that accumulate strength throughout the journey. Life shows us that true power lies not in how much we possess, but in how much we are able to offer, even when it seems we have almost nothing. The mechanic, with his worn tools and humble routine, teaches us that the impact of a gesture lies in the heart that sustains it, not in the size of the available resources. The most remarkable revelations often come not on the big stage, but in the quiet backstage of everyday life. This simple man's story shows us that behind every act of kindness lies a lesson that transcends borders. It's not just about helping someone in need, but about transforming the way we see the world, about rewriting the narrative of scarcity into one of emotional and spiritual abundance. The gesture of not charging for a repair was more than a free service. It was a silent declaration that empathy still has a place in such a fast-paced and competitive world. The unimaginable consequence wasn't just the letter, nor the proposed transformation it contained. It was the change in mindset that was born within him, and that would inevitably spread to everyone around him. Kindness has this contagious power. It brings out the best in those who practice it, inspires those who witness it, and often plants seeds in hearts we never imagined touching. It's as if each gesture were an echo, capable of crossing time and resonating in the most unexpected places. And perhaps this is the great truth hidden behind this story. Real impact is not measured in material goods or immediate rewards, but in the invisible transformation that occurs when someone decides to act generously. This makes us think about how many opportunities have gone unnoticed in our own lives simply because we fail to see beyond appearances. The mechanic could have seen only a wealthy, distant customer, but he chose to see a human being before him, and that decision changed everything. Comment below. That makes sense to me. I want to know if you also believe that these small gestures have the power to rewrite entire stories. Never underestimate the power of a gesture of kindness. It may seem small, almost invisible, but it has the ability to travel paths we cannot control, cross barriers we cannot see, and return in ways we could never imagine. The mechanic's story shows us that true wealth lies not in how much we accumulate, but in how much we are able to give, even when life seems limited. His generosity was more than a momentary help. It was a milestone, a watershed moment that changed not only the rich man's destiny, but also his own. And this is the great lesson we carry from here. Every act of compassion opens invisible doors. Every selfless choice turns on lights in places that previously seemed dark. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this reflection isn't limited to a single story. It extends to every decision we make in our daily lives. The look we give someone who goes unnoticed, the patience we have in the midst of a rush, the hand we extend when no one else is willing to help. It's in these silent scenes that life's true miracles happen. Perhaps you've already experienced, and if you've made it this far, that already shows that this message resonated with you. So, take advantage and subscribe to the channel to continue following stories like this, which inspire, move, and make us reflect on the value of each gesture. Also, leave your like, because it helps keep this connection alive and allows more people to receive content that touches their hearts. And I really want to know who stayed until the end, so comment below. I'm with you until the end, so I can recognize your special presence on this journey. Oh, and it doesn't stop there. There's a video right here that expands on this topic and will make you think even more about the power of kindness. Click through and follow me there.